Background reporting tonight, business rescue, a process set out to restructure the affairs of an entity in distress, has been found to be experiencing a crisis of trust from South Africans. This, according to a survey conducted by Deloitte. Joining us to share more on this, we are, of course, joined by Mitchell-Marais, a turnaround and restructuring leader at Deloitte. Good to have you with us, Joe. Thank you very much for your time and staying on. Why is business rescue getting such a bad rap?
Good evening, Tabo, and thank you very much for having me on your program. So in our annual restructuring survey, we asked restructuring professionals, which include restructuring lawyers, lenders, advisors, and business rescue practitioners, as well as this year what we called the missing voice, that of the C-suite, our client, a number of questions regarding business rescue. And it was really when we started to analyze the responses to those questions and specifically compare them to prior year surveys that we started to see a difference in the way respondents had replied to questions regarding fees, questions regarding what needed to happen to improve successful outcomes in business rescue. And ultimately, when you unpack those responses, for example, if we look at the fees of business rescue practitioners, in prior years we had said, is the uplift that business rescue practitioners request considered fair and reasonable? In prior year surveys, the response was yes. This is a complex procedure, and the fees that are included in the Companies Act are considered to be outdated. However, this year, there's a much greater leaning towards actually no. The fees are not considered fair and reasonable, and the stakeholders, specifically financial institutions, would like those fees linked to creditor recoveries. And we held a number of interviews in completing our survey, and when we really pushed for, well, what's changed? Why is it now more creditor recovery based as opposed to this is complex and the fees are outdated? It comes down to, well, perhaps there's a bit of abusive process going on. You know, when your fees are linked to the amount of time you charge, the longer you're in business rescue, the more business rescue practitioner can make. So if the fees are linked to actually what do the creditors get at the end of this process, that would be considered a more fair and reasonable remuneration basis. When we also asked, you know, what would improve the skills and qualifications of business rescue practitioners, considering that 77% of our respondents said they felt there were less than 30 business rescue practitioners who were considered adequately skilled and qualified out of a set of 393. The responses were threefold. One was consequences for poor performance, i.e., you know, if you are not conforming with the requirements of the Companies Act, your license needs to be revoked. There needs to be disciplinary action for business rescue practitioners that are not performing within the confines of the law. Two was there needs to be more experience in this space. Yeah. You know, business rescue is complex, right. And in order to be considered skilled and qualified, you need to have completed a number of these. And how do you do that if you haven't been exposed?
Yeah. As complex as it is, I mean, if you were to ask Labour, for example, on the number of business rescue processes, especially in public entities, there's a sense and a feel that business rescue practitioners do not prioritize the retention of jobs and employment. And what was your assessment of that?
You know, business rescue is there. The first, you know, the primary objective is for the business to continue as a going concern. Its secondary objective is that creditors get a better return than liquidation. And when you look at, you know, who's business rescue there to serve, it's what we call affected persons. Employees are very much a part of that. And we've seen some judgments recently which I believe protect employees. So, you know, I think it is all too easy when you're looking at a company that is in distress to say, well, where can we save costs? Let's retrench staff. I think we need to change that narrative. You know, in a country such as ours, where we have the highest unemployment rate in the world, job preservation has got to be at the top of our consideration.
Yeah. And on that question of then integrity and trust, and what do you do in instances where the business rescue process itself does not result in better performance of the entity?
Mm. That's one of the challenges we have is, if the business rescue, as I say, it does have a second objective, and that is to achieve a better return than liquidation. So it is entirely probable that the business rescue process does not result in the continuance of the business. It can be wound down through that process. Ultimately, in order to achieve that first objective, it means you need to be identifying the distress far earlier, so you have a much greater chance at achieving the business continuing as a going concern. That is a perennial problem in the restructuring industry, is how do we get in early enough? How can we help businesses to identify the warning signs well ahead of the crisis, so that there are many more options available at our disposal as restructuring professionals, such that we can hopefully achieve that first objective rather than looking at the second.
Yeah. And I suppose the better, broader conversation is around how you strengthen in-house corrective action before even business rescue practitioners come on.
Absolutely. And that's why, for me, incorporating the voice of the C-suite was so important in this year's survey, because we asked a number of questions of the C-suite specifically, which was we gave them a whole list of trigger events. For example, the withdrawal of facilities, or that you're forecasting a covenant breach, or that you're forecasting that you're not able to meet your debt service requirements. And we asked them, what action would you take if these trigger events materialized? And in almost all of the responses, the majority was very internally focused. I'll consult with my board, I'll speak to the management team, not really external, not, well, I'm going to seek advice. And that was particularly concerning, because those are quite serious warning signs, which would mean that consultation and communication with key stakeholders, particularly financial institutions, should be taking place. We also asked the C-suite, what KPIs do you measure and monitor on a regular basis? And we asked our other respondents, the restructuring professionals, what they believed boards should be measuring and monitoring on a regular basis. And what was so interesting is that the C-suite, the boards, were saying, well, these are the metrics that we consider important, and we're measuring them frequently. But the view, specifically again of financial stakeholders, is we don't believe you are. We think these metrics are also important, but we see them being actually measured less frequently. And what we can draw from that is that the analysis is not sufficient. What the board are looking at and seeing as trends, they're not really interrogating. What does that metric tell you? What further work is needed and required? Who can we bring in to help and support? It's more viewed as it's part of the board pack. Let's have a look at it. Revenue is declining. Do we have a reason why? Okay, that makes sense. Move on. It's really digging down to the heart of it.
Yeah.
And that's what we see coming out in the survey.
And what does the survey tell us overall around the legislative framework or regulatory framework, and what needs to happen there to strengthen, I suppose, the integrity of the business rescue process?
Well, the survey is crying out for regulation. The company and CRPC is tasked with that role, and we really need them to come to the party and regulate. We need almost a watchdog with teeth that has the ability to revoke licenses for poor performing business rescue practitioners and those that do not comply with the law. We did ask the restructuring lawyers what their view was around recent case law, and by and large, I think the overall majority, or like the recent case law, is actually contributing to the success of business rescue. So we're seeing, the judiciary coming to the party, but now we really need to see the regulator coming to the party too.
Mitchell-Marais, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on.